Hello folks, it's Chris, KY4CKP. This week we're going to do a function check on some of the main components for the HF radio install into my wife's vehicle. That's what's coming up next on LCARA Ham Radio. All right, folks, in this segment, we're just going to go over the functional testing of the main components for this HF radio install in my wife's car. I just wanted to test everything, make sure, A, that the components are good, because you can always get a factory defect fresh out of the box, and make sure all the components work together, and just get a nice functional test before we try to put things in the vehicle, and then it becomes a lot more difficult to troubleshoot or pull something out and send it back or whatever the case is. So here you see we've got everything laid out on the table here in the outdoor studio, and we were just going to mount everything or at least connect everything, and again, just make sure it works. We're not worried about making contacts or anything like that. Just want to make sure that all the components appear to work and play nicely together. So we're going to go through connecting all these main components together and just kind of demonstrate that, sure enough, everything did in fact work. So we start out taking a look at the ATOS 120 Alpha antenna. This is Yaesu, and I have one of these on my car. I've had it for about a couple of years now, and I really like it. It's not that it's the greatest antenna in the world. It's not that there aren't other screwdriver type antennas for mobile use, and many of those are very nice as well. But I do like this one. It works well for me. I can get all over Europe and South America and pretty good distances from my vehicle. It's pretty small. That was one thing I do like about it. It's a fairly small form factor, and the fact that it can interact directly with several of the Yaesu radios, like the FT891 that I have in my vehicle, and the 991 Alpha that we're going to be putting in my wife's vehicle. I like that. You don't have to have any other control boxes or anything like that. So here we're just taking a look at it. You've got the main whip there that just goes into the top, and there's a set screw right there that you can see. When you mount this in your vehicle, check all the connections occasionally, pretty much like any antenna, and just make sure that over time vibrations and things haven't started to work things loose. Then as far as the diamond mount, this is one of those trunk hatch type mounts, which I also use on my car. You just push the SO239 connector up through the base, and then it has that big sort of a washer slash nut on the top. You'll screw that down, and then you can see the SO239 sticking out right there. And you just screw the main part of the ATOS right down on top of it, as you can see here. So now the one thing I did with my vehicle, and I may end up doing it here, is I fabricated a copper washer. Basically, I just got a copper fixture because I couldn't really find anything that was going to work. Mashed it flat, drilled out a bigger hole, and used that for extra grounding. That's one thing about the ATOS. It's very sensitive about grounding to get good functionality. Now here you can see I've also in this instance got the add-on radials so that the ATOS can tune down to 2 meters and 70 centimeters. We're going to have to see how this is going to work out. They're longer than I thought they were going to be. You can find pictures of this online, of course, but there really wasn't anything that gave it a very good scale. And so the longest whips are probably just over 2 feet. But I did test it, as we'll see a little bit later, and I was getting less than 2 to 1, about 1.7, 1.8. So it does make it usable down all the way to 2 meters. Of course, it comes out to a mini connector, but it also comes with the full-size adapter for the 120 Alpha, so you can connect it to a regular cable extension or directly to your radio if the, I think it's a 6-foot cable is long enough for you to do that. So we're getting things connected, just kind of showing off the main components there. I bought a few additional components for connectivity. I bought some of these right angle adapters. Now I needed 2 because the 991A does have, the 2 antenna inputs, HF input to 6 meters and then 2 meters, 70 centimeters separately. And I'm going to use this Duplexer, or Duplexer here, the CF530, because one side will do 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and the other side will do HF. But I decided to use the right angle connectors to come out of the radio because of how I'm going to mount it in the car, which we'll be seeing in an upcoming episode, if you will, maybe part 3, maybe part 4, we'll see. And so you can see we got those connected up. We've got the duplexer ready to go. And then we connect to the antenna. So again, we want to test that duplexer. We want to make sure that's working okay. That's really, again, what this was all about, just a functionality test of all the components. Make sure everything's good before we start getting it all into the somewhat cramped quarters of the car and everything. So here you can see we've just got it attached to the 120. I've got a little makeshift metal plate there that I connected to, and I also ended up running a ground from the radio to that plate, and then that plate to the actual ground right off the concrete there. So we did manage to achieve a minimal amount of grounding to get responsiveness out of the system. I'm sure it wasn't great grounding, but again, on 2 meters, we were actually had a SWR less than 2 to 1. Again, 1.7, 1.8. All right, so now we've got a Yaesu power supply hooked up just to mains power. The vehicle I'm going to put this in has mains power in the back. So initially, because we have a 10-day road trip to California coming up, I'm going to use this. I may eventually run some power connectivity to the battery compartment in the front of the vehicle, but for this trip, I really didn't feel like I had time to do that. So we're going to use this Yaesu power supply. It works just fine. I'm also going to be using an external speaker so I can remote it and have it up closer to where we're going to be sitting in a cab, so that we can hear the radio just fine, even with the road noise going down the interstate. And so I got the model here. What was this? Yeah, the MLS 100. Again, wanted to check the functionality, make sure everything works before we get it into the vehicle. Also got an RG45 flat cable, regular Ethernet cable. I found out that those work just fine as microphone extensions. I use, I think, that same cable and one of these couplers for my car installation because the body of the FT891 in my car is in the back of the vehicle. So again, I had to remote a speaker and the microphone, that kind of stuff. And so I use this same setup, just a Cat7, but it's a flat cable. I just felt that was easier to hide ultimately than the regular style cable. So I just hooked that up. Of course, I didn't need it, but again, we're just testing functionality. We want to make sure that all the connections work, the buttons on the microphone still work, some things like that. And of course, just bought extras as far as those right angle adapters and these couplers right here. Just bought extras just because it seems like you're always going to need that stuff. Now, I've also got a Windows 10 tablet I'm going to use to control the radio. So I bought an extra long USB cable. Notice the connectors here. These go from what's called USB-B. A lot of people associate these with printers because a lot of printers use that style of connector. And that's what the radio has on the back there, USB-B. And then it comes out to USB-C. And the tablet has USB connection. And I'm running the Win4 Yaesu, Win number 4 Yaesu software. We've done a video on that before. And it does a pretty good job of allowing you to control the radio. The nice thing with the 991 is it actually even will bring up all of the in-depth menu selections. Again, we talked about that in an earlier video. But that's going to be my remote head unit because the 991A doesn't have a remote head capability. So again, we just hooked that up, testing that cable, testing this tablet. And this is an inexpensive tablet. It was one of the relatively cheap ones you can find on Amazon. Less than $250. All I wanted to do is pretty much be a head unit for the radio. So we've got some things hooked up. We've powered up the radio. We're checking the Win4 Yaesu software and the connectivity to the tablet. It's working just fine. I can adjust things on the tablet and the radio responds. I can adjust things on the radio. The tablet senses that and responds as well. I've used this software at home. Again, we did a previous video to help me control my radio so I don't always have to go to the radio to do things. And again, it really works pretty well. It's not free, but you can check it out for 30 days if you think you may have a use for it. So again, we just wanted to do a check. So we wanted to check the functionality of 2 meters. I didn't bother checking 70 centimeters. There's not a lot of active 70 centimeter repeaters in my area. I don't use it that much. Of course, the radio can do it. It can do System Fusion, C4 FM as well. But I did check some of the local 2 meter repeaters. Worked just fine. Again, I checked the SWR and was able to hit them just fine. Full quieting, of course, on the local repeaters, which I would expect. I mean, the antenna was not in a great spot, but let's take a quick listen.
KY4CKP, radio check.
Welcome to the KK4SWU repeater.
All right, so you can see we were hearing the repeater nice and clear, and of course, it was coming up 4th of July, so every lawnmower, weed eater, and leaf blower in the neighborhood, I think, was going that day, as you could hear. But yeah, got the 2-meter repeater. The SWR is good there, and I also wanted to check on the HF just to make sure, again, the radio's talking to the antenna okay, and able to do the tuning, because that's where people can struggle with this radio, and you just really have to take a look at the grounding. But you can see it's going up and down right there. So the functionality test worked. We should be good to go ahead and get this mounted in the car. We'll be doing that and part of the continuing prep for that coming up. This is Chris, KY4CKP for Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association 73.